The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Picture this, a competition that will blow your mind. In one corner, we've got a crack team of MBA students. These folks are sharp as tacks, polished, analytical. They're the kind of people who color code their sock drawers and optimize their morning coffee routine. In the other corner, a bunch of 5-year-olds. These kids don't strategize. They barely finish sentences. They mostly just pile on top of each other, grabbing stuff, making a mess, failing spectacularly, and somehow trying again. Here's the challenge. Build the tallest tower you can using 20 sticks of spaghetti, some tape, some string, and one marshmallow. Oh, and that marshmallow? It's got to sit on top. Now, if someone put a gun to your head and made you bet everything on one team, who are you picking? Come on, it's obvious, right? The business students. They've got brains, experience, and probably really nice LinkedIn profiles. It's like betting on Mike Tyson in his prime against a group of puppies. But here's the kicker. You'd lose everything. Study after study shows that kindergartners build towers more than twice as tall as the business students. Meanwhile, the MBA towers, they usually collapse into sad little piles of broken pasta. This isn't luck. This is a mind-bending paradox that reveals something profound about how exceptional teams actually work. It tells us we've been staring at success through the wrong end of the telescope. We obsess over individual talent, credentials, and genius. But these sticky-fingered chaos agents show us that what really matters isn't what people have in their heads. It's what they create between them. It's the invisible web of connection, the unspoken rhythm that lets regular folks do impossible things together. So what's their secret sauce? What invisible code are they cracking? For years, Daniel Coyle embedded himself in some of the world's most extraordinary groups: Navy SEALs, the San Antonio Spurs, Pixar, even a crew of master jewel thieves. He was hunting for the answer to exactly this question. And what he discovered wasn't some sprawling list of best practices. It was 3 skills. Just 3 simple, learnable abilities that act as a kind of master key, unlocking a group's hidden potential. This isn't your typical rah-rah teamwork manifesto. It's a deep dive into the hidden mechanics of human connection. It's a practical playbook for transforming any group you're part of, your family, your team, your garage band, your future startup, into something that transcends the sum of its parts. By the time we're done here, you'll understand these 3 skills inside and out. You'll see how they work, why they're so powerful, and most importantly, how you can start using them today to build teams that don't just succeed, but absolutely thrive. So let's dive into the first part of the code. Let's figure out why those kindergartners, with their chaos and sticky hands, are actually secret geniuses at building world-class teams. So what was actually going down in that spaghetti tower experiment? The business students, for all their smarts, weren't really working together. They were trapped in this subtle status dance. Who's leading here? Can I push back on that without looking like an idiot? What's the hierarchy? Instead of focusing on the actual problem, turns out marshmallows are weirdly heavy and spaghetti is basically engineered to snap. They were performing for each other. Managing impressions. Their interactions looked slick, but underneath, total hesitation, complete inefficiency. The kindergartners? They couldn't care less about who was in charge. They just smushed together, shoulder to shoulder, like one weird 6-armed organism. When something broke, they didn't blame anybody or call a committee meeting. They just grabbed more spaghetti and tried something else. Their approach looked like pure chaos, but functionally, pure brilliance. They were running rapid experiments, getting instant feedback from reality, and course-correcting on the fly. They weren't smarter people. They were working in a smarter way. And the reason they could pull that off comes down to the first crucial skill in the culture code: build safety. Now, when most of us hear safety, we think of bubble wrap and participation trophies. But safety in a high-performing group isn't about comfort, it's about security. Psychological safety is the bedrock that every great culture is built on. It's the bone-deep feeling that you can screw up, speak your mind, or show weakness without getting destroyed for it. Think about it this way. Our brains are ancient survival computers. For hundreds of thousands of years, getting kicked out of the tribe was a death sentence. So this part of our brain, the amygdala, is constantly running a background check on our environment, asking one question on repeat: are we safe here? When the answer is nope, our brain flips into survival mode. We get defensive, hide our mistakes, protect our image, just like those business students. But when the answer is a clear yes, that same part of our brain completely transforms. It stops being a paranoid security guard and becomes an enthusiastic connection builder. It's a total rewiring of what motivates us. So how do great groups broadcast that "you're safe here" signal? It's not through motivational posters or big speeches. It's through a constant drip of what Coyle calls belonging cues. These are tiny, almost invisible signals that say, "I see you. You matter here. We're in this together." These can be absurdly simple: making eye contact, really listening instead of waiting for your turn to talk, a quick fist bump, asking genuine questions, acknowledging someone's unique contribution. Coyle shares this fascinating experiment called the Bad Apple Study. Researchers put together 4-person teams to work on a marketing plan, but they secretly planted an actor in each group to play a bad apple. Sometimes he'd be the jerk, all aggressive and confrontational. Sometimes the slacker, barely lifting a finger. Sometimes the downer, radiating depression and fatigue. In almost every group, the bad apple infected everyone. His negativity tanked performance by 30 to 40%. When he slacked off, everyone else started slacking. When he moped, the whole room's energy flatlined, except for one group. This group crushed it, no matter what the bad apple threw at them. The researchers watched the footage over and over, trying to crack the code. And they traced everything back to one guy. Let's call him Jonathan. Jonathan wasn't some alpha leader barking orders. He was a master of belonging cues. When the bad apple would get nasty, Jonathan would lean in, smile warmly, and defuse it with a simple question. He'd turn to others and say, "Hey, what's your take on this?" He radiated this vibe that said, "This is a safe space. We're all connected here." He made everyone feel secure enough to contribute. And in doing that, he completely neutralized the toxicity. Jonathan's group won because they felt safer, not because they were smarter. This plays out in the real world in dramatic fashion. Coyle points to the early 2000s race to build the first killer internet advertising engine. The favorite? A company called Overture. They had the cash, the experience, the visionary founder. They were the MBA students. Their scrappy competitor was this young upstart called Google. They were the kindergartners. Google's project AdWords was a disaster. Searches produced completely absurd ads. Search for a specific motorcycle model. Get ads for immigration lawyers. It was embarrassing. One day, Google's founder Larry Page printed out examples of these failures, scrawled, "These ads suck," in huge letters, and pinned it to the company kitchen bulletin board. Then he just walked away. That note was a signal, not a formal directive, but a raw, vulnerable call for help. And late that Friday, an engineer named Jeff Dean, who wasn't even on the AdWords team, saw it. He had his own mountain of work, but something about the problem clicked for him. He didn't ask permission or schedule a meeting. He just dove in. He worked straight through the weekend, coding through Sunday night, and by 5 in the morning on Monday he'd emailed a fix. That fix cracked the problem wide open. AdWords exploded, becoming the money machine that funded basically everything Google did for the next decade. Meanwhile, Overture drowned in bureaucracy and politics. They were managing status. Google wasn't smarter, Google was safer. It was a place where an engineer from a completely different team felt secure enough to jump into a crisis and solve it without being asked. This safety thing is so powerful it can even cut through the hatred of war. Christmas Eve 1914, World War I trenches. German and Allied soldiers who'd been trying to kill each other for months suddenly, spontaneously stopped fighting. It started with singing. A Christmas carol floated from one trench, the other side applauded, then sang one back. Soon, soldiers cautiously climbed out of their trenches, unarmed, and walked into no man's land. They shook hands, traded chocolate and cigarettes, played soccer. Historians call it the Christmas truce. It wasn't ordered by generals. In fact, the generals were horrified. It was pure human connection bubbling up from the bottom. But why? It wasn't just holiday magic. Coyle explains that for weeks before, the two sides had been sending tiny belonging cues to each other. The trenches were so close they could hear each other's routines. They developed informal micro-truces, stopping fire during meals or supply runs. Each moment was a signal. I see you. We're not so different. We're safe for now. They'd been quietly building a foundation of psychological safety. The Christmas truce was just the moment that foundation became visible. Here's the crucial thing. Building safety isn't a one-and-done event. It's continuous. It's like tending a fire that never gets to go out. Which brings us to one of the world's master fire tenders, Greg Popovich, coach of the San Antonio Spurs, the most successful professional sports team in America over the last 2 decades. Popovich is known for being tough, demanding, sometimes volcanic. He yells at his star players. He can be brutally blunt. From the outside, he seems like the opposite of a safety builder. So how does he create the most cohesive, selfless team in all of sports? Because the yelling is only part of the message. Popovich is obsessed with connection. He touches players' arms, looks them dead in the eye, has deep conversations about everything except basketball, politics, history, wine, food. He famously flew to the Virgin Islands to spend 4 days with Tim Duncan before drafting him, just to know him as a person. They talked about life, not layups. After a crushing last-second loss in the NBA Finals, a loss so painful, one player said it felt like death, Popovich's first command was, "Family, everybody to the restaurant." He gathered his devastated team and their families and spent the night not analyzing the loss, but reconnecting, reminding them who they were together. He was refilling their emotional tanks. His harsh feedback works because it lands inside a relationship of deep trust. It's what researchers call magical feedback, and it has 3 parts. 1. You belong to this group. 2. This group has high standards. 3. I believe you can reach them. Popovich's yelling isn't just criticism. It's his way of saying, we have high standards here. But it's always wrapped in an ocean of signals that say you belong and I believe in you. That's the essence of building safety. Creating an environment where people feel seen, connected, and secure enough to bring their full selves to the work. But safety is just the foundation. It's the soil. Once you've got fertile soil, you need to plant a seed. You need to create the kind of deep trust that lets a group actually perform at the highest level. And that takes us to the second skill, which is probably the most counterintuitive one. July 10th, 1989. United Airlines Flight 232 is cruising peacefully over Iowa when a massive explosion rocks the plane. The tail engine has disintegrated, and flying shrapnel has severed all the hydraulic lines. This is catastrophic. The pilots, Captain Al Haynes and his crew, have lost all ability to control the plane. The steering controls are useless. The plane is lurching wildly, tilting so far right it feels like it's about to flip into a death spiral. The odds of losing all hydraulics? 1 in a billion. Airlines didn't even train for it because it was considered 100% fatal. In the cockpit, peak chaos. The pilots are wrestling with dead controls, white-knuckled and terrified. And in that moment of absolute terror, Captain Haynes, the man everyone's looking to for answers, says 4 of the most important words in aviation history. Anybody have any ideas? That simple question was an admission, a signal of profound vulnerability, not a command, but a plea. I don't know what to do. I need help. This is the second skill of the culture code. Share vulnerability. We're taught our whole lives to hide weakness, project confidence, look competent. But Coyle shows that, in exceptional groups, the opposite is true. Vulnerability doesn't come after trust. It creates trust. Sharing vulnerability is the mechanism that builds trust. When Captain Haynes admitted he was lost, it opened the floodgates for cooperation. A passenger named Denny Fitch, a pilot trainer who happened to be on board, was called to the cockpit. He saw the chaos and said, "Tell me what you need, and I'll help." Another vulnerability signal, not taking charge, but offering to serve. Together, these men, shoulder to shoulder, did the impossible. They learned to fly a crippled plane using only the throttles of the 2 remaining engines, something no pilot had ever done. Their communication was messy, full of questions and repetitions, but they were building a shared brain, figuring out the problem in real time. Against impossible odds, they guided the plane towards Sioux City for an emergency landing. The crash was horrific, but miraculously, 185 of the 296 people on board survived. Later, in simulators, experienced pilots tried to replicate what the crew did. They ran the simulation 28 times. Every single time, the plane crashed long before reaching the airport. The crew of Flight 232 survived not because of individual skill, but because they were willing to be vulnerable together. This is what Coyle calls a vulnerability loop. It works like this. 1. Person A signals vulnerability. 2. Person B detects it. 3. Person B responds with their own vulnerability. This exchange creates a shared norm. It flips a switch that says, "It's safe to cooperate here. We're in this together." We see this everywhere in great groups. At Pixar, they have the brain trust. When a movie's in development, the director presents it to the studio's most experienced filmmakers. The feedback is brutally honest. They'll tell directors their characters are boring, their story's confusing, their jokes not funny. Ed Catmull, Pixar's president, says, "All our movies suck at first." The brain trust is where they admit that and start fixing it together. The Navy SEALs have a similar ritual called an after-action review. Immediately after every mission, successful or not, they gather in a circle, no rank, weapons down. They go over every decision, asking, what went well, what went wrong, how do we fix it? These sessions can be raw and emotional, but they're the engine of improvement. One SEAL commander says the most important words a leader can say are, "I screwed that up," It's a vulnerability signal that gives everyone permission to be honest, learn from mistakes, and build a shared understanding of how to be better. This muscle is built through shared struggle. Coyle tells the story of Draper Kaufman, founder of the precursor to the Navy SEALs. Kaufman designed training based on one brutal idea: force teams into constant shared vulnerability. The most iconic part? Log PT. 6 trainees have to lift and carry a 250-pound telephone pole for what feels like forever. It's agony. But the point isn't just pain. The point is you cannot do it alone. If one person weakens, everyone feels it. The others instantly adjust, taking more load to keep the log steady. It's a physical conversation through the wood. I'm struggling. / We've got you. / Your turn. / I'm here. It's a constant vulnerability loop. It strips away ego and fuses them into one unit. This same principle fuels creative groups like the Upright Citizens Brigade. UCB has produced an absurd number of comedy stars: Amy Poehler, Aziz Ansari, Ed Helms, Kate McKinnon, Donald Glover. Their secret weapon? A long, complex improv game called The Herald. Most improv is about quick jokes. The Herald is the opposite. It's a 40-minute, multi-layered performance that almost always fails spectacularly. It forces comedians to let go of ego, stop trying to be the funniest person on stage, and instead listen, support, and build something together. It's creative log PT, designed to make them vulnerable together, over and over, until cooperation becomes instinct. The power of this skill is that it creates groups that can solve seemingly impossible problems. Coyle shares the story of the DARPA Red Balloon Challenge. The government hid 10 large red balloons in secret locations across the entire United States and offered $40,000 to the first team to find them all. One intelligence expert called it impossible. Hundreds of brilliant teams jumped in. Most built sophisticated tools, satellite analysis, social media scrapers, top-down, centralized approaches. The winning team from MIT found out about the challenge just 4 days before it started. No time for fancy tools. So they created a simple website with a powerful invitation: if you help us find a balloon, we'll pay you $2,000. But also we'll pay the person who invited you $1,000, and the person who invited them $500, and so on. Other teams, message, help us, you might win. It encouraged hoarding. MIT's message was a vulnerability loop. We can't do this alone. If you help us, we all share the reward. It created a cascade of trust. Within 9 hours, their network of 665 people found all 10 balloons. They won because they understood cooperation isn't about incentives or technology. It's about creating relationships of mutual risk. Building safety creates the foundation. Sharing vulnerability builds the trust that lets a team cooperate on that foundation. But cooperate toward what? What direction are they moving? This brings us to the third and final skill. September 1982. Johnson & Johnson faced an unthinkable crisis. 6 people in Chicago died after taking extra-strength Tylenol laced with cyanide. National panic. In hours, Johnson & Johnson went from one of the most trusted brands in the world to a purveyor of poison. Stock plummeted. Experts declared the Tylenol brand dead forever. The company's leaders gathered in a makeshift war room. Hundreds of decisions, no playbook. The critical question: what to do about 31 million bottles of Tylenol still on shelves nationwide. The FBI and FDA urged limiting the recall to Chicago. A national recall, they argued, would cause unnecessary panic and cost over $100 million. Logical argument. But CEO James Burke and his team ignored it. They made the stunning decision to pull every single bottle off every shelf in America. Why? Burke pointed to the company's credo, a 311-word document from 1943 carved into their headquarters wall. The first line, "We believe our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, and patients, to mothers and fathers and all others who use our products and services." That single sentence made an incredibly complex decision feel simple, not a choice, a reflex. This is the third skill of the culture code: establish purpose. Safety and vulnerability are about how a group connects. Purpose is about what they're connecting for. Coyle discovered that great groups are obsessive storytellers. They constantly tell and retell a simple story. This is who we are. This is where we're going. This is what we're about. Purpose isn't some mystical internal drive. It's about creating simple, clear beacons that focus a group's attention and energy on a shared goal. These are high-purpose environments. They're filled with small, vivid signals that link the present moment to a future ideal. Walk into a KIPP school, an incredibly successful charter network, and the walls are covered with college pennants. Bathroom mirrors ask, "Where will you go to college?" The message is relentless. This is where you are, and college is where you're going. This works because of how our brains are wired. Psychologists discovered a powerful technique called mental contrasting. Simple. First, vividly imagine a goal. Then, vividly imagine the obstacles in your way. This two-part process, here's where I want to go, here's what's blocking me, creates powerful motivation. It doesn't just make us feel good, it energizes us to act. High-purpose environments do this for entire groups. They create a shared mental map. The Johnson & Johnson credo was that map. Years before the crisis, Burke sensed the credo was becoming just a PR gimmick. So he held meetings challenging managers. If you can't live by its principles, we should tear it off the walls. They debated, wrestled with it, and recommitted. They were refreshing the story. So when crisis hit, the story was alive in their minds. It guided thousands of decisions by hundreds of people with splendid consistency. Coyle shows there are two main ways leaders build purpose, depending on the goal. First is for proficiency, when the goal is machine-like reliability, doing something the same way every time. This is Danny Meyer's world in his famous restaurants like Union Square Cafe and Shake Shack. Meyer's world is built on simple, memorable catchphrases. Read the guest. Athletic hospitality, collecting the dots and connecting the dots, making the charitable assumption. Each phrase is a tiny story, a mental model for behavior. Making the charitable assumption means if a customer's rude, assume they're having a bad day, not that they're a bad person. It's an if-then rule that guides behavior in uncertain moments. These aren't cheesy slogans, they're operating code, repeated and modeled relentlessly until they become, as one employee said, part of the oxygen. Meyer is like a lighthouse, beaming out a constant, clear signal. We take care of people. The second type is for creativity, when the goal isn't getting from A to B, but navigating to an unknown destination, X. This is Ed Catmull's world at Pixar. Catmull isn't a lighthouse. He's more like a ship's engineer. He doesn't steer. He moves around below deck, checking systems, making sure the team has tools and support to navigate the treacherous journey of creating something new. His purpose building protects creative autonomy. He surrounds teams with systems like dailies and the Brain Trust, designed to help them see their own mistakes and find their own solutions. His catchphrases are simple and open-ended. Fail early, fail often, face toward the problems. His goal isn't providing a map, it's equipping the explorers. The proof came when Disney bought Pixar and put Catmull in charge of their struggling animation studio. Disney Animation had been failing for years. Catmull came in, changed none of the people, but completely rewired the systems. He took creative power from executives and gave it to directors, created the Story Trust, their version of the Brain Trust, built a culture of safety and vulnerability. Result? The same people who'd been failing for a decade suddenly produced a string of massive hits: Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Zootopia. He didn't give them new purpose. He created conditions where they could discover their purpose together. And that's the final secret of the culture code. Building great culture isn't about being a certain way. It's about doing certain things. Creating safety, sharing vulnerability, and telling the story of us, over and over, until it becomes truth. When you step back and look at the 3 skills Daniel Coyle lays out, build safety, share vulnerability, establish purpose, what you're seeing isn't just a recipe for a successful team. It's a blueprint for a more deeply connected way of living and working together. What strikes me most about this book is how it demystifies what we usually call magic. We talk about teams having great chemistry, like it's some random force of nature, like lightning in a bottle. Coyle shows us it's not magic at all. It's science. A set of skills you can learn, practice, and master. The first lesson, build safety, is a profound reminder that connection comes first. Before performance, before innovation, before you can even begin working well together, you have to feel safe. This is so fundamental, yet we constantly overlook it. We push for results, demand performance, but forget to tend to the human foundation of trust. The simple act of really listening, asking questions, signaling that someone matters. These aren't soft skills. They're the bedrock of high performance. The second lesson, share vulnerability, is perhaps the most courageous. It asks us to go against our deepest self-protection instincts. It tells us strength isn't found in hiding weakness, but in revealing it to one another. The vulnerability loop is powerful because it shows trust isn't something you slowly build over time and then cash in. The act of being vulnerable itself creates instant trust. It's a leap of faith that creates solid ground beneath your feet. And finally, establish purpose. This gives the first 2 meaning. Safety and vulnerability create a powerful, connected group, but purpose gives that group direction. What I love about Coyle's take is that purpose isn't some grand, abstract mission statement. It's small, vivid, everyday signals. It's telling a story that answers, who are we, and where are we going? So how can you start applying these ideas right now? You don't need to be a CEO or coach. Start small. First, focus on one-on-one safety. Next conversation you have, practice being the best listener the other person has ever met. Phone away, lean in, ask questions. Don't interrupt to add your story. Just signal in every way. I'm listening. You matter. You'll be amazed at how this shifts the dynamic. Second, dare to be vulnerable first. Next time you're in a group and don't know something, or made a mistake, admit it. Say, I'm not sure, or I screwed that up. It'll feel uncomfortable for a second, but watch what happens. You're sending a safety signal to everyone, opening a vulnerability loop. Third, tell the story of us. In any group you're part of, study group, project team, even family, start defining what you're about. Create simple catchphrases that capture your goals. Talk about where you're headed. Remind each other why your shared work matters. Make purpose feel real and present. These skills aren't complicated, but they require consistent practice. They're muscles. The more you use them, the stronger your groups become. Because in the end, the secret to building something great isn't finding superstars. It's learning the simple, powerful language that lets ordinary people connect, trust, and work together as one. That was our journey through the core ideas of the Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. We've explored what makes great groups tick, but I'll be honest, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It shows major landmarks, but can't replace actually walking the terrain yourself. The real magic is in the stories, the details, the quiet moments, when Coyle's writing makes a concept click in an unexpected way. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this journey's worth taking. If anything we've talked about today sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that could genuinely change how you lead, collaborate, and connect with people who matter most. Also, if you found this valuable and you're hungry to learn more from brilliant minds, please hit that like button and subscribe. We're building a community here, dedicated to exploring life-changing books together, and I'd be honored to have you join us on the next adventure. Let's keep growing together.